It is just 13 days before the first event of this primary season, the party caucuses in Iowa. Over the next 2 weeks, this program will conduct separate interviews with all 8 of the Democrats. Tonight, our first interview is with George McGovern. But before we turn to him, we have a report from Cokie Roberts on just how different this McGovern campaign is from his last effort 12 years ago.
Well, we really are in the snows of New Hampshire, aren't we? Reporters ask me from time to time if nostalgia is one of my motives. I didn't know what they were talking about, really, until I got up here to New Hampshire, and I think even the reporters feel it. There is something about coming into nostalgia, into New Hampshire that conjures up images of John Kennedy and Estes Kefauver and Richard Nixon and Barry Goldwater, Ed Muskie, all the people that have been made or broken up here. My own race in '72.
Nice to meet you.
That was the year the little-known senator from South Dakota came out of nowhere to finish second in New Hampshire and first in headlines all over the country. Nostalgia for that time regularly creeps into this campaign. A day of stumping around the state even includes dinner at the Memory Lane restaurant in Manchester, replete with reminders of past triumphs. George McGovern's first sojourn into New Hampshire led to his nomination for the presidency and led many young people into permanent political activism. Others lost their illusions when they lost the presidency and dropped out of the process until their hero returned.
Well, you got the spirit back in. Well, thank you.
Steve Chugg is one of the many old McGovernites who seemed inspired by the re-entry of the last politician who meant something to them.
I have not voted since 1972. I became so darn disillusioned after 1972 that I just couldn't bring myself to vote.
This is Ginny Mahan. I'm working for McGovern for president.
Virginia Mahan was 11 when she helped her father push pamphlets for McGovern in 1972. Now she's the coordinator for the state's biggest county, where her campaign begins with a list of old McGovern supporters, not all of whom are ready to sign up with the senator again.
Naturally, it's not as strong as I'd like it to be, but people still, I think, have that that emotional, I don't know what it is, to him. That emotional tie. Yeah.
Kathleen Mahan Camveris went as an 18-year-old delegate for McGovern to the convention in 1972. For her, the plain-spoken, plain-state senator still arouses strong emotion.
He doesn't have to do it. He doesn't owe anybody anything, but he's doing it again, and I think that's right. I do. I really feel so strongly for him that I really haven't felt this way about too many people.
I think the McGovern campaign was the single most important personal experience that I've ever had, maybe ever will have. I happen to believe, my very best friends come from that experience. I believe strongly that by the end of a campaign, the campaign itself takes on the personal attributes of the candidate. I've been in campaigns where, boy, we were so efficient, or you stylistically represented the candidate. In George McGovern's campaign, what you had it was just a special feeling of affection between people.
Joseph Grandmaison, McGovern's state campaign manager in 1972, stayed active in politics. This year, he's working for John Glenn. He's one of the many people who signed up in 1972 and never left politics again, some at the national level, others in local politics. Their participation in the McGovern campaign led them to believe they could make a difference. Kate McGovern, no relation, now works for a coalition of activists for a variety of causes in Concord. A recent McGovern stop at her office seemed like a trip back in time to his last campaign.
It really makes you think about how, if you take an issue, say like the Vietnam War, which was, of course, the main issue at the time, and you realize that by getting involved personally, you can begin to help change that. I think you begin to see that getting involved politically can make a difference and that it's a worthwhile thing to do.
The Vietnam War also brought Pauline Anderson into politics in 1972. Since then, she's run for the school board and local alderman. This year, she's on the ballot as a McGovern delegate. Back in 1972, as Nashua coordinator, Pauline Anderson worked out of the office now occupied by Peter the tailor.
I had two sons that were 19 and 21, and I didn't want them to go over into that quagmire. I had the opportunity to meet Senator McGovern very early in the campaign, and he just struck me as being such a decent man. And I thought that's what we needed in the White House.
What gives me the greatest satisfaction is that they haven't dropped out of politics. I think you'd be amazed to know how many of the Democratic Party officials across this country, from the counties to the states to the national, are so-called McGovern supporters from '72.
So you feel in some ways you've changed people's lives?
I do indeed. Every once in a while I run into somebody who tells me that she met her husband in my campaign, or a husband who says, I met my wife. I have to tell you, I caused a few divorces.
I was going to say, you don't want to tread too heavy on this.
These schedules are very, very hard on married life.
It's not just the lives of the people that have changed between McGovern campaigns, it's the mood of the country as well. 12 years ago, the Vietnam War brought college kids by the score into the campaign of the candidate who pledged to end the war.
There's no galvanizing issue that generates volunteers and supporters that you don't even know, because they know you and they know that you're standing right on the issue that's at the center of their lives. You don't have people traveling all the way across the country to sleep on floors in order to canvass in New Hampshire. Very little of that in this campaign.
Nowhere is the change between McGovern's campaigns more apparent than on a college campus. 12 years ago, students crowded into large halls to give the candidate the kind of adulation usually reserved for a rock star. Now the students see the candidate as a creature from their childhoods.
Many of you in '72 were probably 6 or 8 years old, however.
And greet McGovern politely but coolly.
They can tell things.
Even some of the questions bear out the popular wisdom that the country shifted to the right.
Why was the Soviet Union able to get away with shooting down the Korean airline?
We're told that they're paranoid about their airspace above their territory, and our intelligence people, after a full investigation, came to the conclusion that they thought that was a reconnaissance plane. Still doesn't justify shooting it down.
Another youngster wanted to know if McGovern feared negative repercussions from a sudden withdrawal of American Marines from Lebanon.
I don't think so. And by the way, my recommendation for an immediate withdrawal from Lebanon, as you may know, is the same position that Senator Barry Goldwater takes. So this is not a matter of doves and hawks.
If the country's indeed grown more conservative, why would George McGovern, the symbol of liberalism, run in 1984 when he was soundly defeated in a far more liberal era?
I suppose the only explanation for that really is that I still want to be president of the United States. I've gone around the country and gotten a good response, and more people have told me to hang in there. 2 more to go, Woody, right? Okay. It gets in your blood, and I'm going to hang in.
Tonight, George McGovern is with us in Washington. Senator, you've just heard the news that President Reagan has announced that we are pulling the Marines out of the city of Beirut and putting them on ships offshore. Was that the right move for the president to make?
Absolutely, absolutely. The only thing that he could have done any better would be to bring them home. I still worry a little bit about kamikaze attacks on the ships out there. I don't think there's much we can do militarily to stabilize the political situation in Lebanon, but thank God they're no longer at the end of that runway. I would only add this. We're going to leave 259 young Marines dead as a consequence of this misjudgment that took them into Lebanon in the first place.
You don't have any concern that we're turning our backs on the Gemayel government and what's left of it?
Well, we stayed there until what you could describe as the bitter end. The whole cabinet has resigned. The Army seems incapable of handling the situation. I think what we had to look at is the very real possibility that those 1,600 Marines could have been annihilated. Supposing we had not made this move to put them on the ships, and tomorrow we woke up to the news that an all-night artillery attack had killed all the Marines. That's the thing that I think is in the President's mind.
What's next, though, for Lebanon? I mean, what if it is taken over by forces that are clearly unfriendly to the United States, friendly to the Syrians, to the Iranians? What is our stake in that area? What should we want next for Lebanon if we're not going to be personally involved?
Well, I think we have to recognize we may not be able to find an American solution. This is an enormously complicated religious and political fight that involves half a dozen different factions. It may be beyond our capacity, even as a great power, to control the situation in Lebanon. What I would like to see happen is for the Pope, with the great moral force of the Vatican behind him and the independence of that office, invite the various factions inside Lebanon to come to Rome to air their differences. I frankly don't know exactly what the Shiite Muslim position is. I don't know exactly what the Druze want out of all of this. I don't know where the Sunni Muslims are. There are half a dozen Christian factions there, and I recognize that these are not all groups that bear allegiance to Rome, but the Pope has shown a great capacity as a reconciler, and if he would use that high office to bring these various spokesmen there to what I think we'd all agree is a neutral corner, give them a chance to air their differences. Maybe that would open the way for reconciliation and a kind of a broad coalition government inside Lebanon.
What do you think American interests are in that region? Where do our interests begin and where do they end?
They're not crucial, vital national interests. The United States has no overriding national interest in Lebanon. That's correct. We may have vital interests in the Persian Gulf, but there's no issue so important to the United States in Lebanon that it ever justified putting those Marines in there. That was a great mistake.
All right, let's turn to another important foreign policy question. You said yesterday that you fear that President Reagan may get this country involved in a war in Central America if he's reelected. Do you really mean that?
I really do, because I take the president at his word when he says that he absolutely will not permit these communist revolutions to triumph in Central America, and I think they're well on the way to triumphing. We have identified so closely with that government in El Salvador. We've sent them $1 billion in military equipment, and I think they're on the road to being defeated unless we intervene. I'm unalterably opposed to us going in there militarily. I don't even believe in the military shipments that we've made, but I think President Reagan does, and I think if he's reelected and the government in El Salvador continues to lose, as it's now losing to the insurgency, I think we're going in.
Well, so you're saying he really would favor a war there before he'd see the country fall to communism?
That's what he says. He has said that he will not permit Central America to come under these communist revolutions that are now going on. I think what's likely to happen is that you'll see the defeat of that revolutionary group that he has working in Nicaragua against the Sandinista government, and we'll go in there.
Well, what do you think we should be doing in that?
I think that our sole effort in Central America ought to be limited to two fronts, basically. Number one, intelligent, imaginative diplomacy. Try to deal with the various factions that are involved there. I'm not saying break relations with any government. I am saying cut off the military shipments, quit embracing that government in El Salvador that has now killed 30,000 of its own people. I'm not talking about killing guerrillas. I'm talking about killing innocent people. Quit trying to overthrow the government in Nicaragua. Get these enormous American military maneuvers out of Honduras that are now going on, and rely on diplomacy, rely on trade, and even a certain amount of economic
assistance. And if that doesn't work?
If that doesn't work, there's not much we can do about it. We can't control.
It wouldn't bother you to have a communist government in El Salvador?
It would bother me, but I think the way we're going now, by embracing these corrupt, repressive dictatorships, we're playing into the hands of the communists. The Russians are embracing the revolutionaries. We're hanging on to the status quo. Who's going to win under those circumstances? I think these old military oligarchies are on the way out in Central America, and we ought to be trying to use our influence with the new forces that are coming into being there.
Let's shift to a domestic issue. I presume you think that the budget deficit should be cut. How much and how would you do it?
Well, I think the $200 billion deficit is completely out of control, and I would follow basically the recommendations of Dr. Martin Feldstein, the president's own advisor. I would raise taxes for the higher income brackets.
By how much?
Well, I would close a lot of the loopholes at the top that are permitting corporations and high-income individuals to escape. Perhaps as much as 70 or 80 billions of dollars could be recaptured that way. Secondly, I would cut the president's proposed military budget by 25%. That's another 65 or 70 billion dollars. And I think that can be done without jeopardizing our security in any way.
Well, now, 25%, that's about $70 billion. Now, even some of the most liberal Democrats in the Congress don't see how you can cut that. What exactly would you cut?
I would knock the MX missile out of the budget entirely, the B-1 bomber. I would call for at least a one-year moratorium on any further missile deployment in Europe.
Even if the Soviets continue to build up on their own.
Exactly. I think we have such overkill on strategic nuclear missiles that if we didn't build another warhead for the next 3 or 4 years, it wouldn't cost us a thing in terms of our real defense. We have the capacity without building another bomb to destroy everybody in the Soviet Union right now, no matter what they do. And since the only function of nuclear weapons is deterrence, we have an adequate deterrent. Why do we continue to pile on these new weapons at the rate of 3 every day when we can already destroy everybody on Earth?
Let me ask you something here finally about your own sense of where your campaign is. You've said that you need to come in third or fourth in New Hampshire and Iowa in the first 2 contests. What will you do if you don't do that well?
Well, I think I'll do what any candidate does who starts coming in 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th. I think the money will dry up. The volunteers will get discouraged. I'll probably have to give way. Now, I don't think that's going to happen.
What do you think?
I think I'm going to be in the top 4. I believe by the middle of March or shortly thereafter, after we've gone through Iowa, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, I think we'll probably be down to about 4 candidates, maybe 5, and I fully expect to be one of those 4 survivors.
You don't think Mr. Mondale has it locked up, obviously.
I don't think he has it locked up. I think a lot of Democrats still don't know who they're for.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator McGovern, for being with us. Robin?